Hello beautiful perception trainers people, and welcome back to another video. So in today's video, I'm going to be sharing with you why allowing myself to get angry at my caregivers was the most important thing I've ever done in my life. One of the most freeing things I've ever done, and contrary to popular spiritual belief, it did not get me trapped in a victim mentality. And in fact, it was the answer to getting out of the victim mentality that I was unknowingly in. So if you've been watching the videos that I've been putting out since I have kind of like come back to YouTube, you know of this basic theory that when we are children, when I was a child, we're in this temporary reality where our parents' view of the world, our parents' view of us, is reality to us as children. Because in real reality, aligning with how life works is how you are rewarded with survival. Not aligning with how life works is why we are punished with pain, and then destruction, and eventually death. And because we humans are so complex, we can play with a lot of destructive behavior before it destroys us. Because we have so many backup systems, we have so much complexity to our being that we don't die immediately when we go out of alignment with the structure of reality. We can, like I say, we can break ourselves against reality quite a bit and learn from that. And that's what's so fabulous about having our consciousness and being as complex as we are, is that in breaking ourselves against how reality functions, we can actually learn from it in a way that we couldn't if we would get destroyed every time we went out of alignment with reality. And from that learning, we can create new things like the airplane. That's what's so fabulous about our consciousness. But again, in our childhoods, we are not interacting with real reality. Because again, if we did that as babies who are so unaware and so incapable of taking care of ourselves, we were not capable of aligning with reality. So we have a codependent relationship with our parents, essentially, where they take care of our needs for us, where they provide for us, where we cannot provide for ourselves, where they are in a position to meet our needs that we cannot meet for ourselves, to provide for us in ways that we cannot provide for ourselves. So if we were left out in nature to just fend for ourselves, we would be punished with death, most likely, as a baby human. We wouldn't have enough time to mature enough to actually figure out how reality works so that we could, recognize why putting the poisonous plant in our mouth killed us, why crawling off a large ledge really hurt and broke all of our bones. We would probably kill ourselves in interacting with reality because we have such limited awareness, limited experience with reality. And therefore our parents are there to be that safety net. But because of that, the flip side of that coin is that what our parents teach us about what gets us love and approval and acceptance and therefore provision in our parents' households, if that is out of alignment with how real reality works, then when we go out into the world, what works for us to get provided for by our parents, so the behaviors that we have to do to be loved by our parents, the things that we are taught are right and wrong and good and bad by our caregivers, the way that we have learned to be in order for our parents to meet our needs. If that doesn't match real reality, when we get out into the real world, we start experiencing real pain of our needs not being met, us not knowing how to meet our own needs, us doing things and expecting a certain result that we get the opposite result from real reality or other people or whatever. And then we're all confused and we're traumatized because our nervous systems have programmed in all of these responses to our parents withholding from us or giving to us when we reject ourselves, or rejecting us and teaching us that we have to reject ourselves, and all of these things that happen here. And we're not conscious of all the programming we have. We're not conscious that, okay, mom and dad believe that being loud and obnoxious is wrong and bad, and that made them pull back from me. So anytime I want to be that in real reality, I have to shut that down, even if that's a real part of my personality. And now that I'm interacting with real reality, shutting down my personality is shutting down my growth, is shutting down life, is now working against my survival. Whereas in my childhood, it worked for my survival, because being loud and obnoxious made my parents pull away from me, which made them not provide for me. So being quiet made them come close and provide for me. So temporary reality, where mom and dad are choosing what is reality, essentially, that is our childhood. We don't recognize that that is a thing. That's the first thing. We're all completely conditioned and indoctrinated that our parents were correct, and that their view of the world is correct. And no matter how much we think we have processed our childhood traumas and looked at it or whatever, like I thought I had done a lot of this, but I was still miserable. I was still getting results in life that I didn't want to get. I was still in pain. I was still not able to recognize what my needs were or how to get them met. I had coping mechanisms and scapegoats and self-sabotage, and I didn't know why I was doing those things. So that was telling me that I was still operating under a false conditioning. My view of the world was incorrect. And that's why, this waking up to reality, snapping out of the matrix, blah, 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 blah. It's not this big esoteric thing. It really is just waking up to, okay, from the beginning of my life, it was programmed into my nervous system that these were the right ways to be and these were the wrong ways to be. And that's how I got sustenance and love and everything that I needed in my childhood. But that's not how real reality works. And now I have to confront all of the false things I was taught that worked in my childhood, because that's the other thing we have to acknowledge, that everything that we are that is dysfunctional in the world was our way of functioning in our childhood home. That was how we got our needs met. It's dysfunctional in real reality, but it was completely functional in our childhood reality. So that's that in a nutshell. So, but for me personally, I was born already super empathetic. The first words out of my mouth were, "Where's God? What are we going to do about all these people? Everyone is in pain, and I'm worried about everybody suffering." They sent me to the guidance counselor in grade 1 because I was so stressed out because everyone was hurting so badly. And so again, this might be a thing that people can look at me and say that was just trauma, like because my mom has her personality that she does, that she was already blaming me and scapegoating me for her problems and her pain and all of these things prior to my even conscious awareness. And of course, because I was a victim to her perspective as a child, I could not say, maybe my mom's pain isn't my fault. Maybe her view of the fact that my crying is making her upset isn't something wrong with me. Maybe my fact that I'm sick and that makes my mom feel like she's failing, and then she can't do something different for me because that would mean she's doing something wrong. She just needs to believe there's something broken about me, and therefore I believe there's something broken about me. Again, there was no way as a child that I could question that perception, because that was the perception of my household. That was the only perspective I had ever been taught. That was the only perspective that had ever been shown to me. So I was completely victim to that perspective. And then that perspective was wired into my nervous system that the way that I get love, the way that I get provision, the way that I get sustenance is through taking the blame for everything and taking responsibility and assuming that everything is my fault and that I am causing everybody harm and pain and all of these things. So growing up, I essentially, if we kind of take a bird's eye view of this, fully identified as the abuser. I did not see myself as a victim to my mom's behavior towards me. And then later on in school with all my friends, I was a complete magnet, obviously, as in like the people I was attracted to being friends with were the people who were hurting, the people who were going through hard things, parents getting divorced, my best friend got cancer, a lot of my friends were just really in pain, and they used me as their punching bag to vent all their frustrations. They bullied me, they picked on me, they called me fat, they did all these things, and every single day it was, I didn't know if I was going to be liked or rejected, and I didn't, and I just wanted to help them so much. I just wanted to love them, and I could see that they were hurting, and I just wanted to love them better. I just thought if I could love them more, if I could understand them more, if I could make space and make time for them, there was no thought to how it was affecting me. There was no thought to I'm being abused or I'm not being treated fairly. Like every once in a while I would cry, like I would go home and cry and tell my mom my friends are mean and why are they so mean to me, and I love them and I just want to help them and I don't understand why they're picking on me and all these things. And she'd be like, well, yeah, that's your fault. You're weird. You need to stop being like this. So there was just this constant dialogue in my life that I was awful, that everyone's pain was either my fault or my job to take it. Right? So my friends would bully me, and I would know they're hurting and they're in pain. Their parents are getting a divorce. She's got cancer. She's sick. He's sad. He's lonely. He feels disconnected. He feels all these things. And I would just let them bully me because I was like, I knew deep down inside they weren't bad people. I knew they weren't trying to hurt me. I knew they were being mean because they were hurting. And that was such a deep knowing in my being from the very beginning that I never put up boundaries. I never learned to put up boundaries. I didn't respect myself or know that I should respect myself enough to put up boundaries. So that was happening, and especially with my mom. I always felt like I was the cause of her pain and that I was the abuser. I was the one to blame for everything that was going on in our household, that I was too sensitive, too emotional, not good enough. Something was wrong with my body and that was making her feel bad. Something was wrong with my emotions and that was making her feel bad. The fact that I needed her to love me after school was too much. I was too much. I was too needy. I was too big. I was making everything awful. And so fully and completely, like I say, bird's eye view of this, I owned the abuser identity. I really thought that everyone's pain was my fault. And if maybe I could see sometimes that I wasn't the cause of the pain, it still felt like, because I can see it, it's my responsibility to try to help them heal. It's my responsibility to let them shit all over me because I know they're in pain and they just need an outlet. It's my responsibility to be ever loving, ever present, ever letting them, like I say, just this perfect martyr of just, I'm just going to be here. I'm going to love you. I'm never going to retaliate. I'm never going to call you out. I'm never going to make you take responsibility for yourself. I'm always going to see that you're just in pain and take it and let you puke it onto me. And then when I can't make you feel better, I'm going to feel like a piece of shit. When I can't make it better for you, I'm going to feel like a piece of shit. Because now it's my fault that you don't feel better. Because you shared your pain with me by being mean to me and all these things, and then I couldn't convince you to feel better about yourself, and therefore, I'm the worst. And so this was my psychology for most of my life. That it made perfect sense to me that I was the cause of everyone's pain. And that I was the reason my mom was so unhappy. And that it really was my fault. That any of her behavior, it was always if I hurt her, it's my fault. And if she hurts me, it's my fault. I either did something to provoke her, and I shouldn't have done that, or she was triggered or something happened, and then if I call her out on it, I'm making her feel bad about herself, and that's my fault, and I should feel terrible about myself because she's just hurting, she's just wounded, she didn't know what she was doing, she didn't mean to hurt my feelings, and now I've called her out on it, and I'm making her feel bad about herself, and I'm just a terrible person. Why couldn't I just shut up? Why couldn't I just, so this is kind of what happened later in adulthood, where I would just, when I would get upset with her, when I would get frustrated with her, when I would say like, look, stop blaming me for how you feel. Stop telling me that I'm too much. Stop telling me these things. You're hurting my feelings. She would be like, well, you're hurting my feelings for telling me that I'm hurting your feelings. You're making me feel bad about myself for pointing out that I hurt you. So fuck you. And I'd be like, you're right. Fuck me. Like, I'm the worst. And so kind of this view that a lot of regular people have, that being mad at your parents for not being perfect and blaming them and getting into this lifelong trap, kind of just blaming your whole life on your parents. I didn't have that. I was the opposite side of the spectrum, where I refused to be mad at my parents for anything. I refused to blame them for anything. If they did something, like I said, if I hurt them, it was my fault. If I did something that they didn't approve of, it was my fault. If they hurt me, or if they weren't there for me, or if they triggered me and I reacted poorly, that was my fault. It was all my fault. And I was overtaking responsibility for everything that happened in our household. I was sick, and therefore I needed extra food. That cost money. That triggered my dad. That was my fault. So I should go get a job, and then I'll pay for my own food and I'll cook my own food. But now I'm doing too well, and that's triggering my mom. So she's going to put dairy in my food even though she knows I'm allergic to it. And then I'm going to yell at her, and then she's going to feel like she's the victim, and I yelled at her, and that's really horrible that I did that. She made me dinner. I can't believe how ungrateful I am. And I'm the piece of shit, right? So it was just this constant cycle of me being the way that I was, having the needs that I had, being the person that I am, was a complete trigger for my mom, because it was just showing her that she was doing things wrong. And that's like objectively, right? Your child is colic. So this was me. I had colic, I had rashes, I had eczema, I had constant ear infections. I was sick. And then she tells me the story that when I was 2 or 3 years old, she put me on an elimination diet, and all of my symptoms cleared up. I all of a sudden became all better. And rather than sticking to that elimination diet, she just went back to feeding me regular food. All my symptoms came back, and I spent the rest of my childhood sick, throwing up like every couple of months because I was allergic to dairy, and we ate it every freaking day. And stomach aches, just stomach aches upon stomach aches upon stomach aches, and chest infections and lung infections and throwing up and sick. And then this whole cycle of her telling me I was making it up, or I was too needy now that I was sick, and all of it could have been avoided if she had just fed me properly. But she couldn't do that because, again, that would have meant that she was doing something wrong and there wasn't something wrong with me, and she couldn't do that. And so I grew up for my entire childhood and up until very recently believing that all my health problems were my fault. I'm weak. Why can't I just be normal and be good like everyone else? And that was the narrative. I was super, super sensitive, emotionally sensitive, so probably needed to stay home a lot. Probably needed to not be exposed to public school and to church and to these big places with all this energy that I was clearly being very overwhelmed by. But my mom wanted me out of the house. So I was constantly being sent away into these situations and into these circumstances that I could not handle. I would come home completely fried and overwhelmed, and then I would be emotional, and that would be taxing on her, and then I would hate myself for that, because that was my fault. Why couldn't I just be calm? Why couldn't I just go to my room and be quiet like my sister? It was all of these stories of just, there was always something wrong with me. It was always that there was something that I couldn't just be normal. I couldn't just live a normal life. These were the rules. This is how life was. And I was failing every single day. It was never anything wrong with her. It was always something wrong with me. If the kids were mean to me, it was my fault. If my mom was mean to me, it was my fault. If my dad was freaked out about money and couldn't be there for me, it was my fault. And then again, like I say, the more I tried to take responsibility for myself and would fix things, that would trigger her even more, because if I was doing better, then she can't blame me for her problems, so then she has to sabotage me in some way so that I can yell at her so that she can make it, she's feeling bad because of me. And like I say, the whole time I had the perspective that mom had a bad childhood. Dad had a hard time at work. They're stressed. They're going through things. I'm making it worse. I did not ever view them as the ones who were at fault. I didn't view anyone who was mean to me as the one who was at fault, because I already had that awareness that they were hurting. They were hurting me because they were hurting. And they were not meeting my needs because they weren't getting their needs met. They didn't know what to do. And I very quickly turned into being someone who wanted to meet other people's needs. I wanted to caretake for my mom. I wanted to caretake for my dad. Like I said, I wanted to start earning my own money so that my dad wouldn't have to pay for me. And I did it. And I became my mom's counselor so early on in life because I, again, took on the role of either I'm the abuser or I'm the person who's going to fix it. I never once saw myself, like I said, as the victim. And anytime I would, that would be beat out of me, right? Like, no. I'm not hurting you. You triggered me. You are hurting me by saying that you're hurt. You are the problem. You're not the victim here. You're the perpetrator. So I fully owned the idea that I was either the abuser or there to be the rescuer. And never once did I ever consider that I was being victimized in any way. So as I grew up and as I started to become an adult, in real reality, in real life, that mindset was totally out of alignment with real reality. So it was causing me pain. It was causing me a lot of pain. It was causing me to live in ways that were destructive to myself. I was an over-the-top martyr. Like I said, starting in school and then going forward, I only made friends with people that I thought that I could help and that would abuse me. They would shit all over me. They would gaslight me. They would blame me for all their problems. I only worked for people who would tell me one thing today, this is what they want, be very vague about their expectations, so tomorrow they can tell me I didn't meet the expectation, and then I would blame myself for being such a shitty employee, and yet take on way more work than I was being paid to do, completely never ask for my fair share of anything. I was a complete pushover. I was pushing myself physically, mentally, and emotionally to the brink every single day to provide everyone's needs and be the perfect person. And on top of that, completely shutting down my feminine nature. I went so hardcore masculine, it was not even funny. Every minute of my day was scheduled, and every emotion, every feeling, everything that I felt and everything that I felt in myself and other people, it was, how am I going to fix it? What am I going to do to make that better? What's my job? What's my purpose? Fix it, fix it, fix it. Work, work, work all the time. No feminine feeling, softness, gentleness allowed. Because again, in my childhood, that was killing me. I was born someone who was incredibly feminine. And in the sense of energetically, what we think of as the masculine energy versus the feminine energy, I very much embodied the feminine way of being. I did not react well to schedule. I was very, just like that, mystical. I was a mystical kid. I would just go out in the forest and talk to God for hours. And like I say, I'm very, very much into just music. I just wanted to be listening to music all the time and dancing all the time and singing all the time and noise and art and color, and like I say, everything was feeling based. Like I was just very, very, very feeling based, and that was not how my mom lived at all. She wanted a tight schedule where everything was predictable so we could get to the end of the day, or it was this tight schedule so that she would get her periods of time during the day and at night where she didn't have to be with us. It was get the morning done so we can be playing so she can have her time alone. Get everything done so we can get to school so she can have her time alone. Get everything done at the end of the night so we can go to bed so she can have her time alone. And it was this like very rigid schedule all the time of just everything was this race to the middle of the day and to the end of the day where she gets her break time. And everything was just a panic all the time. And so I started obviously to become very neurotic. Growing up in that household, I was neurotic. I was anxious. I was depressed. I was overwhelmed and all of these things. And Herculean effort, did really, really well in school. Like no one would have ever known. That's the other thing, is that I was just really, really good at doing it. I picked myself up and I got myself to do it. And I think this is part of the reason why in nowadays, if people who knew me in my childhood hear me say, like, I think my mom has a personality disorder, they're like, there's no way that's possible, because me and my sister were so good. We were so capable. We became so self-sufficient and driven and never kicked up a fuss. And we just praised her. Like, that was the other thing too. It's for my whole childhood, I had no, like I said, perception that she might be off in her way of being. It was all, if there's anything wrong, it's my fault. And I worshipped her. I absolutely worshipped her. And in the sense of, I wanted her to be happy. I could see she wasn't happy. I felt like all of her pain was either my fault, or later on in life when I started to be like, well, here's something you can do about that, or here's something that maybe you can try. All she would hear is that I'm telling her it was all her fault and that she's the cause of all of her pain, and like I was blaming her for it. She couldn't hear that we're adults, and therefore when we take responsibility for our part in our pain, we then have power to fix it and change it, because that was my perspective, right? Like once I started dieting and seeing that I could actually make my body better, I was like, well, I'm so glad to know that I was wrong about eating these foods, because that means that the pain I was in is not permanent. The fact that I was wrong means that I could change, and then there's something better. But to her, the fact that she is wrong means that she's horrible and there's nothing she can do, and now the world is ending. So it either has to be she's a complete victim, or what she's doing is perfect. And that didn't sync, obviously, with real reality and the pain that she was experiencing. And then, like I said, as I'm starting to recognize that pain is a result of the things that we are doing, and we have control, we can change, we can do different things and get better results. And I started to try to give her that advice. That became a whole new thing of, she would call me to get me to start to give her advice, and then she could say, you're making me feel bad about myself, and then she can blame all of her pain that she was already feeling on the fact that I made her feel bad about what she was doing, instead of like, no, you already felt bad about what you were doing, that's why you called me. And then when I told you that you can do something about it, you could blame me, and then it's, now the pain is because of me, it's not because of the thing that you're doing or the thing in your life. And I see that now. But anyways, what does it have to do with getting mad at my parents? So like I said, I did not naturally have a victim mentality. I naturally had I was the perpetrator or the rescuer mentality. So when I first started to get into like, okay, I'm going to start to get in touch with my emotions, I'm going to start to deal with this eating disorder and like why this is happening and why I'm wanting to pick at food and all of these things, I started to get aware of myself. I started to create spaces and times during the day where I really wanted to distract myself with counting calories or doing something to lose weight, and I took all that stuff away from myself. And I let myself sit with what came up when I took away my coping mechanisms, because I knew that dieting and blaming it all on my body and picking at food and all of these things were my coping mechanisms and my scapegoats. They weren't the actual problem. They were how I was dealing with my pain. They were not the cause of my pain, and I was very clear about that. Addiction is how we are dealing with pain. Scapegoats are how we are blaming what's going on currently on past trauma that is continuing to come up that we've never dealt with. Our self-sabotage is not the reason we are in pain. It's how we think we're saving ourselves. It was what worked to get our needs met that we didn't understand and our parents didn't understand in our childhoods, that no longer is actually working in real reality, but it works better than nothing. So when I would sit with myself, I would feel this anger at my parents starting to well up. and just this seething hot rage at my mother. And I would just shut that down. Like, no, you cannot be mad at her. She is not to blame here. Think about her childhood. Think about everything she went through. Think about how much she just wanted to do what was good for you. And this is not her fault. No, 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 no. And so anytime I would feel that anger, I would turn it in on myself. Or I would, like I say, jump to, yeah, but it's not her fault. I understand why she did it. She was just hurting. It wasn't any of these things. And I would flush that. And then I would keep on with my life. And I started to just recognize that eventually, every single time I got quiet with myself, there was just that anger. And as much as I could tell myself, I understand why she did this. I'm not actually mad at her. And I don't want to be mad at her, and I don't want to blame her because I love her and she's in pain, and just, I don't want to feel mad. And anger is not a spiritual emotion, and that's so immature. And so what if I was a child? I'm an adult now. I can't be mad at her. I can't blame her for my life. I can't blame her for my pain. All of these things. These were my stories. And eventually, like I said, I just got to this place where I was like stuck. I was stuck in my growth. I was stuck in what I could do with moving forward, like with my healing and all these scapegoats and things that I wanted to change about my life, and the shitty jobs I was in and all of these things. I was just stuck. I could see that I needed to quit my job and stand up for myself, but I couldn't do it. And I needed to take a break and rest more, but I couldn't do it. I just couldn't convince myself that these things that were so obviously in my conscious awareness, the right answer, my nervous system wouldn't let me do it. And this is a big thing too. People always ask me, like, once I identify a false belief, so I could see that I started to be able to see sort of my false belief that I'm not allowed to rest and I'm not worthy of love and everything is my fault and all of these people are hurting and I need to take it. And I started to be able to see that that was true. But even though I saw that, just seeing the truth and just awareness of that was not curative. Because again, in my nervous system, the way I reacted to that, to be codependent, to overgive, to martyr myself, to make it my fault, to accept the blame in some way, to just scapegoat the pain onto myself, onto my body, and make it about that. That's how I survived that. So every single time I faced that, my nervous system took over. I wasn't working from my conscious mind. I wasn't working from my new awareness that those beliefs were incorrect. My cognitive center wasn't in control. My nervous system was in control. My programming was in control. My conditioning was in control. So when I finally was just like, okay, fuck it. I'm not going to be a spiritual person. I'm just going to get mad at her. I'm going to let myself get mad at my mom. And I'm not going to look for how she meant well and it just didn't go well. I'm not going to give her an excuse that she was just overwhelmed. I'm not going to make it 50-50. It was my fault. I triggered her. I'm just going to give myself permission to get mad at her for being a shitty mom. Because at the end of the day, a lot of the things she did were just shitty. It's shitty to know that your kid's allergic to food and to feed it to them anyways. It's shitty to blame your kid for how you feel. It's shitty to tell your kid that you don't want to be around them and that the point of your life is to just like have alone time, and that everything that kid is doing that's extra time for you is a burden. It's shitty to tell your kid in so many words that their sickness is their fault and that they are inconveniencing you. It's shitty to tell your kid that the kids at school don't like you because you're weird and you just need to stop being that way. And so again, very slowly, I started to let myself get mad at her and just be like, that was just shitty. I don't care. And finally, the first thing that clicked was like, okay, wait. She was the adult and I was the child. Why was I being expected to take so much responsibility for her feelings and her emotions and her pain and her faults when she was the adult and I was the child, number one. And wait a minute. Maybe in real reality, I shouldn't have been responsible for her emotions. I shouldn't have been made responsible for her pain. I shouldn't have been thinking about how I could help her or what I could do to make her life better. But she should have been thinking that way about me. She actually was responsible for my pain. She actually was responsible for my physical body. She actually was responsible for the fact that I was suffering so bad. And never once did we think maybe she's failing. It was always, no, she's perfect. She's doing everything right. If I'm not getting my needs met, that's because there's something wrong with me. If I'm in pain, that's because there's something wrong with me. And then if she's in pain, that's something wrong with me. And I need to be there for her, but she shouldn't have to be there for me. And finally, I started to be like, wait a frickin' minute. I'm a person too. And that was like a revelation. Allowing myself to get mad at my mom helped me to, on a nervous system level, not just my conscious mind, my actual nervous system level, get this new awareness that I exist as a person and I'm allowed to have needs and wants and take up space in the room. And it's not just my job to be what everyone around me wants me to be or not be what everyone around me doesn't want me to be. It's not just my job to serve others. I'm a person too. And that was like, whoa, okay. Right? Like I had cognitively understood that at some point. Everyone had told me that you deserve to be a person, self-love, all these things. But I didn't get it. Like I didn't get it in my core in a way that allowed me to be able to behave differently in my life until I was able to feel that anger. Until I let myself process the emotion of being a victim in my childhood. And really, 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 what this led to, okay, so like really letting myself get mad at her, get mad at my dad, because they failed me. They failed me on so many levels. And not because of me, because they are traumatized children who couldn't care for children. And like I said, when I stopped taking responsibility for them and stopped with their narrative that I was playing a role in it somehow. Like especially I see this in the spiritual world of like, we chose our parents and you knew what you were getting into and your parents were hard on you or whatever, but you chose that. And that is fucking bullshit. Like, I'm sorry. Like right now, I'm like, no. That is taking on a narcissistic parent's narrative. That something that the parent did to you was because of you. No, it wasn't. If your parents abused you, if they couldn't let you be yourself, if they couldn't help you grow, if they couldn't help you process your emotions, if they couldn't help you process your traumas, that was a failing on their part. And again, this doesn't mean that they're bad people. So many parents are just traumatized children themselves. Most people are just traumatized children. They were traumatized by their parents. They never learned how to do these things. They were never taught. They're just passing it on. No one is a bad person. And I'm sorry, everyone, right? This video isn't going to resonate with anybody. Because the spiritual people want to say we have complete control and we chose it, and I'm calling bullshit on that. That's a narcissistic narrative that we take on to carry on our parents, like I say, not having to blame themselves for how they abused us. Bottom line, that's all that is. So I don't appeal to that. But I also don't appeal to the people who want to make them bad and horrible and they just get off on pain. Yeah, because that's how they learned to get their needs met in their childhood. They're not evil, bad, and wrong. They're also conditioned. They're completely conditioned and have no idea about their conditioning and what worked for them, the manipulation and the competition and the I win by you losing. That's how they learn to get their needs met in their childhood. That's their conditioning. It's not evil. That's their programming. That's what their nervous system knows to do when they're scared. It doesn't matter if they consciously understand that they're hurting someone. Deep in their nervous system, all they know is that's how I get my needs met. I attack and then I win. There's only so much. because they had that experience in their childhood, and it was true for them, and it's programmed into their nervous system, and they can't be different now. So again, nobody's consciously choosing, really, any of their behavior. Most of us. Until we start to actually allow ourselves to emotionally process. Until I started to allow myself to emotionally process what I went through. To emotionally process the anger, which then led to the sadness. The just earth-shattering, core ripping out of me sadness for how sad my childhood was. How sad it was that I spent my entire childhood thinking I was a piece of shit. That I was ruining everyone's life. That everything was my fault. That is sad. That was so sad. And how much of my life I spent trying to fix things that were not within my control. I couldn't help people. And then how sad it was that I let my friends, like I never found friends. Because I didn't feel like I deserved friends. I felt like the only point of me being alive, felt like I was already in the negative by being alive. I was already costing too much. I was already too much, already too needy, already taking up too much space. The only way that I could get through a day was to be helping someone. And if I didn't help enough that day, I was just in debt. And that's sad. Like, that is so sad. And like I said, but that was programmed into my nervous system as being the only way to be. It was programmed into my perspective as the only real perspective. And like I say, just because I had heard cognitively other different things, it didn't mean anything. It didn't help me change my behavior. Understanding that I was believing that I was a piece of shit and I didn't deserve to be here, and that wasn't true, didn't mean anything. Not until I felt it. And when I felt it, when I let myself get mad and I let myself get sad, and like I say, then it was a revelation, like, oh my God, I'm a person. I deserve to be here. I should be able to, like, say no sometimes. I should be able to stand up for myself. This way that this person is treating me is inappropriate. And what it led to was not more victim mentality. Okay, so this is what I really want to make clear in this video, is that getting mad at my parents, getting mad at my caregivers, getting angry with what had happened to me, didn't turn me into someone who then just blames everyone for how I'm feeling for the rest of my life. No, what it did was it empowered me in my actual nervous system to, in my adulthood, because here's the thing, now that I'm an adult, my mom is no longer responsible for how I feel. My mom is no longer responsible for my health. My mom is no longer to blame for how I live my life. Because now, as an adult, I have the capacity to question my own conditioning. I have the capacity to say, okay, if it hurts, there's something wrong here. I'm believing something wrong. And to figure out the truth and then to live it, even though it goes against everything that's in my wiring and my biology to do to survive in my childhood. And it's going to feel like death. So here's the other thing. When you're asking me, like, once I understand that my belief is false, why can't I change my behavior? Why does it keep hurting? Because our nervous systems are programmed that to do anything different than what we're already doing is going to equal death. So we have to be able to be loving of ourselves enough that we feel that fear of someone rejecting us. We feel that fear of someone blaming us. We feel that I need to go out and just save the world and make everything better. And all these things that we've done, all of these behaviors that are built upon our false belief. These behaviors are what our bodies think save our life. They are what our nervous system think we have to do to survive. So again, it doesn't matter how much your conscious mind understands that isn't true. Your nervous system is taking control. My nervous system made me a martyr. My nervous system said, no, blame yourself, don't blame her. My nervous system would take over and say, make it about food, don't make it about your mom. Make it about food, don't quit your job. Don't ask for more than what you are worth because you're not worth it. The only way to get your needs met, you're going to get attacked, you're going to get destroyed, if you stand up for yourself. Because that's what happened in my childhood. Anytime I stood up for myself, I got destroyed. Anytime I was doing too good, I got destroyed. So I sabotaged myself in my adulthood. Anytime I was doing too bad, I got destroyed. So I always had to be in this like sort of good but sort of failing state. I would never let myself go below a certain level of health or below a certain level of mental place, but I wouldn't let myself go above a certain level either, because in my nervous system, that was the safe zone. So it doesn't matter how much I consciously wanted something different, consciously wanted something to do something different, consciously would be making choices to better myself. I would cut myself off at this level because that's where I would get sabotaged. And so by letting myself get mad at my parents, I started to be able to see where all my behaviors were coming from. I started to be able to see why my nervous system was doing what it was doing. I started to be able to understand why, even though I knew better, I couldn't do better. Because emotionally, I had learned this is how you have to be to survive. And it was true in my childhood. But it's not true in real reality. So getting mad, getting sad, grieving all that stuff, and then really the scary part, grieving the fact that my parents didn't know better, that they weren't operating under benevolent, that the rules that they taught me on what is good and what is bad, what is right and what is wrong, and all of this that shaped my view of reality wasn't from some benevolent, they understood something better than me, they were right place. It was admitting like they didn't fucking know what they were talking about. They were wrong. It was so much of it wasn't what was good for me. I learning to like not quit, like that was a huge one. I got overwhelmed very easy by big crowds and all these things, and Mom always taught me, you don't get to quit. You have to go anyways. You have to go. You can't quit. You're never allowed to quit. And I internalized that as like, okay, that's some awesome lesson. That's some real thing, like some really important thing. Never quit, never quit, never quit. Okay, it doesn't matter how much it hurts. It doesn't matter. And at the end of it being like, right, that wasn't so bad, was it? It's like, yes, it was. It was absolutely horrible. The relief I feel right now is that it's over. And then that started to get programmed into my mind. It's like, that's a good way to be. To push through things that feel really, really terrible and that your body and your mind and your emotions are screaming at you, don't do this, this is awful, I hate this, I don't want to be here, I don't want to be doing this. Push through it and then be proud of yourself at the end. And then realizing, whoa, no, that all of that pain that was coming up was because that wasn't the right thing for me. And the reason she was pushing me to do it wasn't to make me better. It was because she wanted to be alone. She just didn't want me around. She didn't want me to quit my activities because then I would be home. And that's where it came from. So it wasn't this big benevolent life lesson, she's helping me something. She was just selfish. And so there was a lot of these things of when I allowed myself to get mad at my parents, I could actually question their conditioning, and that was like, oh no, they were really wrong about a lot of things, and therefore I'm wrong about a lot of things, because the way they taught me was the way that I lived. Whether I consciously was trying to be different or not, I was emotionally driven to push myself to do things that I didn't want to be doing, that my body and my nervous system were telling me this is not the right way for you. I would do it anyways, and it would destroy me every single time. Never worth it, never once. It was never one of these situations where it wasn't so bad and aren't you so glad you pushed through that. No, 0%. There are no things that weren't, and so that doesn't mean that things that were right for me weren't challenging sometimes, but there was never, when something is truly right for me and it's challenging, it's like there's this fire inside to do it, and I'm so motivated, and it's just like the goal is worth it. The goal is so worth it, and there is a joy and a pleasure even in the struggle, but mostly it's joyful. When something is just slog and horrible and heavy and feels terrible the whole time, I have pushed through so many of those things and gotten to the place, the end, and it was never worth it. And so destroying myself for that, not worth it. Destroying myself so that other people don't have to feel bad about their own conditioning? Not worth it. Being a codependent so that no one else has to feel how terrible they're being? Not worth it. But again, this didn't turn me into someone that just then blames everyone for how I'm feeling. This more became, I started to take responsibility for myself. I started to actually be able to take responsibility for myself, where I would say, okay, look, boss, look, friend, I see that you're behaving in this way, and I completely understand why you're doing it. I don't blame you. There's nothing wrong with you. I see you're taking advantage, whatever. Here's what I would like instead. Can we have it so that when you have a request of me, you make it clear what you want? And if I don't deliver it to you, can we just, instead of telling me how stupid I am or how wrong and bad I am, can we say that wasn't what I wanted, or I feel frustrated? Any of these things, that's fine, but just instead of telling me how dumb you think I am, can we do it like this? Or like I say, needs with my husband. Instead of me, now I can understand when I feel disappointed by him or rejected by him or let down by him, I can understand that that's probably a childhood trauma. That's probably a mirror image of I'm expecting him to meet a need for me because I'm doing something for him in my head. And it's this whole unraveling where I can take responsibility for myself, and then I can say, okay, well, a lot of this is actually just I don't know how to take a break. And so I'm expecting him to make me feel a certain way, and that's not his job. And then, like I say, more and more it became the way that I carry myself, the way that I behave, the way that I am. There's a lot of, boundaries I didn't even need to set. Like I said to my mom, I'm happy to continue to have a relationship with you. And I love you, and I see that you're in pain, and I know that all of these things you did to me come from your trauma, but you're just not allowed to blame me for it anymore. I'm not going to take the blame for how you feel. If you want to talk to me about your problems, I'm going to give you suggestions for what you could do about it, and you don't get to tell me that I'm the one making you feel about it. And she stopped talking to me. That's what happened. I said, this is the behavior that I'm okay with. I completely understand. You're allowed to be your way. And the thing too is, if she was going to not do that, I was going to either call her out on it and say, look, I'm not going to take the blame for your behavior or your feelings right now. This isn't my fault. Or I was going to stop talking to her. It wasn't her job to change. And so it started to become this unconditional accepting of other people's behavior, of seeing that a lot of what they were doing is their nervous system. I'm going to make this request of, can you be different? And the answer is probably going to be no. Because they're moving from wounding. They have expectation of me that they don't even know that they have. They are taking their pain out on me. All of these things are happening. And rather than requiring them to be different, I basically just stop participating. And I think that that's really what this anger has allowed me to do, is just, I'm not going to play the game. Right? I'm not going to sit here and let you yell at me. I'm not going to agree with you that your pain is my fault. I will gladly process with you if you want to look at where your pain is actually coming from. I am happy to feel your pain with you, to all of these things. But if you're going to blame it on me, I'm checking out, because that's my right. And learning to stop martyring myself came from being mad at my parents. So the bottom line of all of this is, I didn't learn how to actually be a new person who could live in alignment with real truth until I let myself get mad, because I was already in a victim mentality. So everyone who's listening to this video, you're already a victim. You're not making yourself a victim. You are a victim to your conditioning. Every single person out there. If you are in pain and you don't know why, if you are doing things that you don't understand, if you're scapegoating, if you're coping, if you're all of these things, it's your conditioning. It's nothing more, nothing less. The spiritual community wants to tell you it's an entity and it's a past life and it's ascension symptoms, blah, 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 blah. I get it. I understand. Because we're swimming in it. We're all conditioned in the same way. We all believe that humans basically have it figured out, and therefore our pain doesn't make any sense. And we have to make a spiritual story about it, or a cosmic story about it, or a past life story about it, or something to make us feel like it's not our fault, or like we have control over it in some way. No, it's just conditioning. The pain is, this is how life works. You were taught to live in a different way, and that's why you're in pain. Everything that you were programmed to do to get your needs met in your childhood, that worked in your childhood to get your parents to provide for you, that's out of alignment with how real reality works, is where you're in pain now. And now as an adult, if you really want to heal, if you really want to grow up, you have to let yourself get mad. You have to let yourself get sad. You have to let yourself feel the pain and the shock and the trauma of your parents not having been right, and the anger and the sadness and all of these things, so that you can start to see the actual things that you're currently doing now in your life that are 100% in alignment with your conditioning, that your nervous system is driving you to do, that are out of alignment with true reality. That then when you change them, you will stop being in pain. And then this is where forgiveness comes in. This is where being in a state of love happens. When I was no longer doing to myself what my mom trained me to do through her abuse of me, when I was no longer martyring myself and living in ways where my nervous system was driving me to do these behaviors to get my needs met in the way that I got them met as a child, that are out of alignment with real reality, when I started to actually be able to be different by loving myself enough and making myself feel safe enough to do different behaviors when I was triggered, to, instead of martyring myself, when all I wanted to do was convince this person to take a step back from the computer, just, okay, go nourish myself. It's not your job. You don't have to convince them. This isn't your fault. This isn't your job. I was finally able to start doing different things, living in actual alignment with real reality. And I'm not saying I'm perfect. I still have conditioning to work through, and I know that. I still have pain. I still have stuff that's out of alignment with truth. I'm still working on my conditioning. Absolutely true. But I no longer believe that it's about this. This is a result of my childhood. All my current pain is a result of my trauma, and it's not my mom's job to fix it. It's not my dad's job to fix it. It's no one's job to fix it. It's my job to feel it so I can understand it on an emotional level, on a nervous system level, and then to love myself enough to do the scary thing of not continuing to behave in alignment with my nervous system trauma response, but to do something different from a higher perspective and prove to my nervous system that a new way meets my need better. Because that's how we actually change our behavior, is we find what the need that the behavior is getting met and how we can meet it in a better way. And we have to convince our nervous systems of that by doing the new behavior over and over and over again, even though it feels like we're going to die to not do the old behavior. And we can only recognize all of that when we let ourselves feel through the anger and the sadness of what happened in our childhood, so that we can finally properly identify what was wrong there and what we need to do differently now. So that is why anger saved my life. Letting myself get angry was the way out of the victim mentality that I never would have gotten out of. I would have stayed in, she's perfect, she didn't do anything wrong, it's all my fault, for the rest of my life. Compassion for her, choose love, and it would have killed me. It wasn't choosing love. That was choosing death. Choosing to get angry, letting myself get sad, processing through it, and then changing myself in the hardest way possible when my nervous system just wanted me to do the old thing was the hard way, but it saved my life. And that's how we do this. So anger is medicine. It is pure medicine when we let it inside. Don't project it out. Process it in a journal. Get a counselor. Punch your bag. Punch a punching bag. All these things. But let yourself feel it. Because that is how we journey from victim to love. Love is when we're no longer living in alignment with the out of alignment life. And we have to become aware of it. And that's how we do this. Okay, so join the Mystery School. I'll see you in the next video. Mwah.